I think there's essentially four stakeholders in the communication process. There's the leaders, the principals, the bosses that you're going to go out and serve. There's the public. There's you. And of course, there's the media. And now that's a simplified version. I know that the information environment is much more complex than that, but there are essentially four. And each one of those four is living in a whole different world when it comes to the public information environment. And I'm just going to talk briefly about what I think those worlds are. So let's talk about your bosses. How many of you have served, I'm sure hands will go up here, but how many of you served for a flag officer or a general officer, a direct advisor for public affairs? Okay, good. So you probably know what I'm talking about. Not all of them appreciate what we do. Not all of them completely understand public affairs. Some of them do. And I think after now going on, 14 years of war, most of them do. But not all. They're living in what I call a post-interview world. Many of them have grown up to think that their interaction with the media, their interaction with the public is akin to being interviewed, right? Like a lecture like this. You get up, you say your points, you say your piece, maybe you take a couple of questions, and then you exit stage right, and that's it. It's over. It's done. But it's not like that. It's not like a college lecture. It's like a college party, right? Now everybody's in the room, everybody's talking, everybody wants to be heard. And you got to be a part of that conversation. And you got to help your boss understand that he or she needs to be a part of that conversation and in that room, whether it's on Twitter or Facebook or, God bless you, by the way, or involved in the community in ways maybe they're not comfortable being involved, because that's their job now. Because when you start putting stars on your collar, or when you're an SES, or you're leading an organization, you are, particularly if you're a federal employee, you are public property, and they need to think of it that way. They belong to the people of the United States, not to the Marine Corps, not to the Navy, and Air Force, Army. And so you got to help them get there, which means you got to help them understand there's lots of different ways to engage, and lots of different attribution, right? Not just on the record. Many of them think that all they have to do is just give an interview on the record, and that's the full scope of it. There's obviously a place for that, and we want to be on the record as much as possible. We owe the taxpayers our honesty and transparency about what we're doing with their sons and daughters and with their money. Then there's the public themselves. I think the public lives in what I call a post-audience world today, and there's two components to that. One is that I don't think you can parcel out the public anymore the way we used to be able to do it. When I started this in 1990 or so, we'd write these comm plans, and you'd have, here's your audiences, Congress, the American people, sailors, families, and for each one of those, we'd have a different set of, messages or how we were going to target them. You can't do that anymore, and I recognize that you all have to write comm plans today, and you still have to do, audience breakouts, but you got to understand that when you're speaking today, when you communicate, it's global in an instant, like that. And everybody, unintended audiences, are going to be able to, if they want to absorb and try to digest what you're saying. The best example of this, and I talk about him all the time, and I mentioned him in this meeting I just came from, is General John Allen, retired 4-star Marine. He's now at the State Department. I get to work with him almost every day now again. It's great. But I got a chance for a short period of time to go out to Kabul when he was the ISAF commander and help him with communications. He was in between PAOs, and I was then one of the spokesmen for Secretary Panetta. And because there was two of us, George Little and me, there was a little redundancy, and the secretary allowed me to go out to Kabul and help out General Allen. It wasn't for very long, again, just a couple of months. But boy, I learned a lot in those 2 months watching General Allen as he communicated the very complex mission of ISAF. And when I got out there, which was in the spring of 2012, you might recall there were a lot of green-on-blue incidences. It was a pretty rough time for our relationship with the Afghan National Security Forces. And General Allen just instinctively understood the complex nature of the relationship and instinctively knew how to simplify that. I don't mean he dumbed it down or anything like that, but he knew how to talk about it in ways that the Afghan people could grasp the seriousness of the challenge, that our allies and partners could, that it could be understood in Brussels and in London and in Paris, but also, just as importantly, and he never forgot this, how it could be digested here in the United States, and in Washington in particular, on Capitol Hill. He knew that, and he was a very strong proponent of the use of social media by the ISAF team, but he knew as soon as they tweeted something that it was going to be read by the Taliban just like it was going to be read by the House Armed Services Committee or anybody else. And he strove to have a consistency and a simplicity in messaging that I think was very wise, and probably wise even beyond, beyond our experience at that level. So that's this post-audience world. The other aspect of it is that people don't want access to information anymore. They want access to conversation. They want to give it back to you. They're not comfortable just being a passive audience. You guys know this. How many of y'all are on social media in a personal capacity? I'm not going to ask about Ashley Madison, I promise. So Twitter, Facebook, all that stuff, right? That's good. And then how many of you do it professionally for your command or your unit? Okay. That's good too. It's important to be out there. I think the dynamics of social media are changing. They're changing faster than I think anybody can keep up with. Twitter's just obviously taken off. I know Facebook continues to change. Their demographics are changing. It's getting older. The fastest growing demographic on Facebook, I think, right now are women 35 to 45, something like that. And as older people are getting on Facebook, younger people are getting off. When my wife started getting on Facebook, my daughter started getting off Facebook. And there's a lot of people on Facebook. You've probably read the stories, about how it's affecting relationships. I mean, a lot of guys looking for their high school sweethearts, and she still won't friend me. That one's going to get me in trouble. So it's changing, but it's this idea that, and you young ones, you're comfortable in this environment, and guys like me aren't. I mean, this idea that the information environment is very democratic. It's very sort of self-policing. There's a low bar to entry, and everybody sort of self-edits each other. You've seen, Yik Yak. Oh my gosh, who's been on Yik Yak? Holy cow, that's an eye-opening experience. And the way people sort of interact with one another, even on Yik Yak, because it's anonymous, right? That's the other thing that's happening in social media, is this trend towards anonymity, which I'm not sure I'm too comfortable with. But anyway, it's this conversation. It's a post-audience world. People don't just want to be messaged. And so when your bosses or your ops guys tell you, well, we need to message that, if they use the word message as a verb, I hope you push right back on them. Don't let them do that, right? We don't message. We converse, we talk, we dialogue, right? We're in the conversation space. Message is not a verb. It's not something that you can fire down range. It's who we are, and it's how we talk to one another. So that's that post-audience world. The media, they're in a post-message world, and I kind of that's my segue to this. They don't want, they know what we do. And I'm sure while you're here, you'll have opportunities. They bring reporters up to talk all the time, and I love reporters. And they know what I do. They know that I spend a large part of my day, even today at the State Department, I'll spend 2.5 hours getting ready for a press conference. And the bureaus will come in and they'll talk to me about the issues of the day, what the headlines are, and what I'm supposed to say about it from the podium. That's the way it's supposed to be. They understand that. What they really want from us is context. It's the most, if you don't remember any word I say here today, remember that one, context. They want to understand. The most common question I still get asked, I used to say this when I was the Pentagon press secretary, now I've been doing it 3 months at the State Department. It's the same question. Why? Why does John Kerry believe the Iran deal is good for America's interest? Why did the Secretary of Defense deploy an aircraft carrier to the coast of this country? Why do we think we're going to beat ISIL, and why do we think it's going to take several years to do so? They want to understand, because the people they work for, their bosses, and the people their bosses are trying to sell stories to want to know why. My mom wants to know why. She still calls me almost every day after press conferences and asks me why I said the things I said. And that's good. I want her to do that. Why? It matters. And so context matters. So they're living in this post-message world. So I'm not saying don't take the things you're learning here and use it. You have to. Just understand that when you get out there, where the rubber meets the road, you've got to take it beyond the talking point level and be able to explain to the people you're communicating with why we're doing what we're doing. That means, back to my point about attribution, being able and comfortable in talking to reporters in attribution that is not always on the record. There's a place and a time for being off the record. There's a place and a time for being on background. And that time and space, if you use it wisely, will help you get them to understand that context. This brings up another point about relationships. If you haven't already been out there working as a communicator, and many of you I know have, and so this will be no shock to you, but I can't overstress the importance of relationships in building trust and credibility with members of the media that you're going to be dealing with every day. Don't get too enamored of your ability to communicate directly. Like, we have that now, right? Because of social media and because of the internet, we got to all have command websites. We can blog. We can send out press releases. We can go straight from the command to the American people, and we should. I'm not saying we shouldn't use those tools, but don't forget the power of an independent media, the power of the press. It matters. And they're a good check on us, and we should respect that. And that means you got to know them and understand them and how they do their jobs. They are just as passionate about what they're doing as we are about what we're doing. In fact, there's a lot of similarities between the media and the military. They're type A personalities just like us. They want to win. It's a competitive environment out there. Very competitive. In fact, more competitive now than it's ever been in the press. They understand the power of speed and accuracy. They want to get it right. They want to improve. And they really believe, just like we do, that they are serving a greater good. And they are. And so what I want you to do when you get out there is develop relationships with them. I'm not talking about friendships or anything that would skew into something that would be unprofessional, but good, solid relationships. Because the worst time to have to deal on a difficult issue with a difficult reporter is doing it with a reporter you don't know, somebody you don't trust, or they don't trust you. So build that, it's like a piggy bank, you're just going to keep dropping little pennies in that bank of trust. And then one day, believe it or not, you're going to have to make a withdrawal from that bank because an issue is going to be very sticky. The context is going to be very hard to understand. And you're going to want to be able to sit down with the reporter from whatever it is and have them understand what you're trying to do, and just as importantly, what you can't do. Oftentimes when we can't answer a question, we don't bother to explain to the press why. If you have a good relationship with a reporter, you can do that. You can take them off the record and explain to them, here's why I can't go any further than I'm going right now. And if you have that relationship, if you built that, it'll pay off. I was having breakfast this morning with some of our young enlisted Navy mass communication specialists who are just, as they always are, just eye-watering in terms of their motivation and their talent. I mean, almost all of them had college degrees. They were all in their 20s. One was in her 30s. They've got great life experience, and they're just going to be terrific for the fleet. And one of them said that, I didn't know this until this morning, that in one of their classes, they make them watch an interview I did with Wolf Blitzer right after the Navy Yard shooting. I was the head of Navy Public Affairs at the time. I asked her, why that interview? And she said, well, because he was really giving it to you, and you stayed composed. I don't remember staying composed. It's great that people think I did, but I don't really remember it that way. But I do remember that day. I certainly remember the shooting, but I remember that day of that interview, and I remember that interview. And what I told this young sailor this morning when she asked me, well, how could you stay so calm? It's because I had a relationship with Wolf. I still have a relationship with Wolf. Now, we're not golfing buddies. I mean, he's a professional, I'm a professional, but I go on his show every now and then, even in this new job. And we trust one another. We we've been working together now for many, many years. And by the time that I got into his seat that day, I was no stranger to him, and he was no stranger to me. And before the camera started rolling, we were talking about football. I knew. I didn't need to ask him what he was going to ask me or how hard he was going to press. I knew he would. That's his job. He's supposed to do that. And my job is to stay calm and collected and try to provide the context on a very difficult day in very difficult circumstances. And again, you could argue about how well I did that. I don't remember doing it quite so well. But Wolf did his job that day. He did what he was paid to do. And that's why I have such great respect for him. And it's why I think we have such a good relationship even today. Look, I think I did Wolf last week, and it was, if I remember correctly, it was on the Iran deal, which is also a very important issue that not everybody completely understands and requires a lot of context. And Wolf gives you the time to do that. But if he doesn't know you, and if you don't have that relationship, it's harder to be able to get that opportunity. So relationships matter, and when you need them, when you have to cash in on them, you'll be really glad you got them. Okay, so that's that post-message world, and the real thing I want you to understand out of there is context is what they need. They don't just want our talking points. So get beyond that.